Hello. Thanks for joining another TeamSense Tuesday webinar today. My name's Caroline, and I'll be behind the scenes of today's webinar where all speakers will be discussing pointers on points. Before we jump in and introduce our speakers, though, let's cover some housekeeping items. So as always, questions are encouraged. We just ask that you place them in the Q&A panel kind of at the bottom of your screen instead of the chat. And we'll get to your questions at the end of the discussion, and I'll be helping manage the Q&A on Sharon and Sarah's behalf. But that's enough for me. I will pass over to Sharon and Sarah, who will introduce themselves. Welcome, ladies.
Hey, good to see everybody. I'm Sharon Brener. I'm the head of design for TeamSense. I have a background in user research, so I'm excited to share with you guys what we've learned from a bunch of customers in the market about attendance policies.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah. I'm on our customer success team. So I get to work really closely with all of our customers and accounts, get to see how policies actually play out on a manufacturing floor. And Sharon and I get to work really closely and collaboratively. So excited to have this conversation across departments today.
Awesome. So today we're going to give you guys a quick survey of what makes up an attendance policy, some common challenges that we see, and how what we've learned is making its way into our product. So we'll have Sarah just get right into it.
Thank you, Sharon. So you may have heard of points of policies. You may already have one implemented at your company, or this may be brand new. I'm going to start with the assumption that this might be new for you. So a little overview of points policies. Companies may choose to use an attendance points policy when they want to assign a specific value for any time an employee is not present, typically in a case of full absence, lates, or even early departures. So we're going to walk you through a few distinct parameters that typically make up an attendance points policy just to kind of ground us together in what that value assignment actually looks like here. So off the bat, those values I'm talking about indicate specific infractions that an employee might make on the attendance policy, usually around unscheduled absences. So times when the employee has committed to being at work and then something happens in life, as it does, and they can't make it in that day. So the first thing you want to decide as a leader is what makes up those values for you at your own location. What is considered a points infraction, and how might you assign specific value or points designation to that infraction? One example of that would be, for example, full absence. Is that the highest value? Is that one whole point? Late, 1 hour late, is that half a point? You get to really flex this around what you know is most important within your own policy. And of course, we are not doing this theoretically. The reason that you're thinking so carefully about your own location's associated points values is because you want to be able to take specific action based on that. At what point or at what accumulation of absences would you need to take a corrective action? And what action would that be? This is when you and your team really get to think about what is working in your employee communication right now, what isn't, and what outcomes you want. So, for example, if you know that if an employee has been unscheduled late 3 times, you're seeing that that starts to have a real staffing and production planning impact, there's probably a corrective action you need to have associated with that. We often see a ramping here. I'm going to give you an example from one of our logistics partners. They have a points threshold at which the first corrective action is verbal warning. That's a conversation with the employee to just be like, hey, do we understand our attendance policy together? Do you need support around this absence reason? It's a real opportunity for clarity, support, and it doesn't have to feel punitive. It can feel that the employee has clear information and they understand outcomes. The second threshold there is written warning or write-up, and then after that, termination. One huge goal here for your own policy and procedure is employee termination should never be a surprise for your team or for the employee. So these corrective actions give you really clear ramping that keep you in good standing with your employee community and keep your HR teams clear. And lastly, we typically do not see points just accumulating indefinitely. Usually there is a point at which points kind of roll off or even reset to zero. There's a couple different ways we see this happening. Most frequently, we see points expiring on a 12-month rolling basis. So, for example, um, if I today accumulated a point, I know at this time next year, that particular instance will be removed. We also see kind of calendar based reset. So at some companies, come 1/1, January 1st rolls around, all points are back to zero. Again, this really just comes down to the policy and procedures that you know are going to be most impactful in your own work environment. So let's
Yeah.
look. Oh, yeah, Sharon,
I
please.
don't know. I was just gonna say we have some examples here of what Sarah was talking about there. Um, this is sort of a sample view. This is not anyone's individual attendance policy, but we typically see a few different kinds of infractions, and so we often see those called out separately in these policies.
Thanks, Sharon. Love that. Um, I can talk about these examples a little bit, and Sharon, jump in anytime if you have specific examples. Um, so, as we think about specific infractions, we want this to be concise and high impact, right? We are not coming up with a multi page of every specific scenario you may encounter. You're coming up with large buckets that speak to your highest impact attendance events. So, most frequently, we're going to see partial absence, full absence, and really importantly, no call, no show, which is truly what we are most trying to avoid here. The employees have real accountability and real, clear, empowered policy notification to not no call, no show. So you'll see, like we gave the example of earlier, a full absence, just one missed day, is often the kind of level set of points assignment. We often see that as a one. That doesn't mean it has to be a one for you. There's a lot of different ways to break up points values. And then in partial absence, you have flexibility here. You can assign even partial points. And then finally, uh, highly recommend points assignments for no call, no shows, being a little higher grade, really indicating to the employee, like, hey, this truly has high impact on our ability to staff and plan. So in your attendance plan, that's going to be represented. This allows the employee to understand, okay, I could take 3 sick days that are well communicated versus racking up points for just one time that I don't communicate.
Yeah, the point value assigned is a really good tool to share to explain to employees how important it is to call off, to show or to let the company know when an unscheduled absence is happening rather than not calling off at all. Um, I also wanted to call attention to this little like kind of disclaimer here at the bottom that infractions should not include absences that are protected. So we had one example of a story that a customer told us of an employee who was calling off weekly at the same time every week, and their manager was like, "Well, we need to have a conversation about this." And it turned out that that employee was going to a weekly chemo appointment, and it should have been classified as FMLA or something different. They shouldn't have been racking up points for that reason. So they were able to work with their manager and the HR team to get it classified to a better spot for everybody. So making sure that those things are accounted for in your points policy as well.
That's such a good example, Sharon, of where we like really bring in the human and communication element here. We can get into the details here a little bit of communication timing and how that may apply to how you think about the impact of absence. If an employee is at least able to plan ahead that day and notice, oh, I'm not feeling good. My kid is sick. I didn't plan this absence, but like I want to be in good, positive communication with my management. That may not be a full point. If someone can communicate before shift start for either partial or full, you could scale that back from one, or you can get down to these kind of decimal percentages to show, like, okay, you weren't here, but you still communicated proactively. And that's really what you want to reinforce here. So you can break this up in a few different ways. Could be notice before shift, notice after shift started, but still communicating within shift time, all the way up to that full no call, no show. And then lastly, of course, to dig into the details a little bit on thresholds and action. Like the example I gave at the beginning, we typically see 2 to 3 warning thresholds indicating a specific corrective action. Um, a really nice thing about having documented corrective action is it also gives your HR and supervisor team the expectation of proactive employee communication. What you don't want internally also is getting into a position where an employee has been no showing, no call, no showing, or just taking too many unscheduled absences. And your internal team, your HR team, did not have the process or tools to know how and when to communicate with that employee. This allows your team to have structure too around saying, hey, it is a great best practice for after 2 instances of late or unscheduled full day absences that we go to that employee and really learn more, like the example Sharon is giving. Um, Again, this can be a great opportunity to just really connect with the employee, understand what's not working, and hopefully then also reduce staff turnover, create the environment where you can learn quickly, you can both adapt and be aligned on the policy moving forward.
Yeah, we see a lot of different policies from our customers across manufacturing and logistics. 6 points, what we're showing here as a sample, is about the median or the average, but we have seen as few as 4 points or as many as 10 points. And policies are often what we hear, which is kind of interesting, is often we'll hear that we want to have a corporate level policy, but that just doesn't work for our site for whatever reason. So often what we really see is policies that are being at least amended a little bit at the to fit the needs of each site. We also see policies sometimes varying by employment status. So having probationary employees on a different points sort of scale than other employees, and yeah, it's a wide array of different ways to make this happen and make it work for your specific site and team.
Mm. And last but not least here, a little more detail about options for how you can let those points either fall off or reset. Again, most common, we've got 12 months rolling. And I did mention January as another reset option. Um, February is a time we also do see some points resetting. Q1 in general is very common. And one reason for that is, as you may have noticed, um, we will sometimes see a little spike in absences when people have points available again. So you can think about kind of when you want your employees to feel most empowered. Um, Oftentimes after the holidays is a good time for that. Super Bowl Monday might be a good time for that. We we were just looking at kind of national absenteeism rates spike shortly after large sports events like that, especially the Super Bowl. Um, it's been fun to watch some of that data fluctuate within our TeamSense system as well, and hear those stories from our customers. And lastly, what I'll mention is, again, you get full flexibility here. This is your policy. It doesn't have to be 12-month. We have organizations also that set points uh, even as a reward or incentive. So if an employee has perfect attendance and they have not had an unscheduled absence, particularly a no call, no show absence, you could reduce points, you could let 1 or 2 points fall off, you can even move to full reset. The goal here is understanding what the impact of that will be, and if it results in positive planning, staffing, and communication, then think outside the box. Anything you would add here, Sharon?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the perfect attendance streak is something that we hear a lot of excitement from our customers around, like being able to provide not only like negative reinforcement, but positive reinforcement for the behaviors that we want to see more often. So being able to remove a point if that's part of your policy, or just be able to know using TeamSense who your top your perfect attendance employees are, and be able to reward them in some other way. So yeah. I think we've covered the basics of what makes up an attendance policy. So we're going to move on to some common challenges. And I'm actually really excited that Sarah, you're here with me to talk about this because you have seen all of these things, I'm sure. I'm just going to load this whole slide and we can talk about all of these as it makes sense. Um, the one that I wanted to start with is that policies can be really complicated because we need to account for all these edge cases and understand like make sure that we know what the outcome is for any different kind of infraction. So we've seen policies that are packets that are like many pages to understand with all of the different edge cases like spelled out. And then we've seen some that are just a page or just one graphic. We at TeamSense we highly advocate for policies being easy to understand for your employees and easy to remember and making things really clear cut. Any specific examples you want to call out for that one, Sarah?
Yeah, I can think of a couple. I love what you said, Sharon, about simplicity. So high ease, high impact is a phrase that a partner of ours actually said to me recently, and I was like, that's it. Um, so so interestingly, yeah, at this particular company, which does plastics manufacturing, um, they were rolling out a new attendance policy, and in I saw, I think, 3 different drafts of this, and it did narrow down. And Sharon, like you said, the final product we looked at was literally kind of 1 paragraph of detail in bullet points and then just points assignment. So what I see being most effective is something that captures both verbal and visual learners in one space. So some quick written guidance, and then the bottom half of this page is just a very similar to what you saw in our examples above, which is where we pulled this from, just a graph or table showing very clearly in bolded boxes specific points assignments so that employees have a quick reference point, ideally without having to dig through a handbook. So as often as possible, employees knowing exactly where this lives, where they can access this quickly, and ideally without always having to ask their supervisor or HR person to see the policy. So does this live somewhere that is accessible to employees? The TeamSense portal is a great option if you haven't used portal yet. Having it posted visibly on office message boards or TAC boards is a great option in addition, so that employees are just kind of surrounded by a clear sense of truth that is visual and easy to track.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, that's a great example. The next one that I think is really I think hits home for a lot of our customers is that the data is kind of everywhere. We hear about policies or about sort of employee files where each of these infractions are stored, either being some we've seen some very complicated Excel macros and very like Excel wizardry that work for individual companies or departments. We also have heard that all of the documentation is stored on paper and filed away in filing cabinets. That's pretty common. And or it's stored points are stored over here in a spreadsheet. You have to figure out how to get it into your HRIS and also into other systems. But really, no matter what, we often hear that data is all over the place and that there's almost always a manual component to managing your points, even if it is in a perfectly organized spreadsheet. It's still there are aspects of it like removing points when an employee brings in a doctor's note, things like that, that make it really difficult to automate and really difficult to remove all of the manual process from. And it's a very serious thing, right? We don't want to give employees points and make them get them closer to a point of termination if we don't have to. We want to keep good people in our companies, and so we want to make sure that we are treating this very seriously and that the data is as correct as possible. But it is really hard. Anything on that one, Sarah? I think we've seen some of the same things and lots of different spreadsheets, lots of different ways of keeping track of this.
No, I think you covered it. And the one thing I'll add is if you are currently storing points in a spreadsheet, and feeling like that's your level one, I just want to reinforce to you that simply having points tracked in a clear spreadsheet, that is what some of our largest company partners are doing right now. Ideally, some of our Your partner systems will be able to do that better for you in the future. I know that many of you are working with large HRS systems that shockingly don't have good points tools. Keeping that clearly tracked for you and employees in a spreadsheet uh, is honestly a great place to start, and it's more than we often see. So, as long as you know where it is and the data is clear and hopefully not super manual, you are in good shape. And that's something that we can then help you access more easily, which I know Sharon is going to talk about a little bit here soon as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even if it seems like a struggle, like having everything in a spreadsheet, like Sarah said, that is one of the better practices that we see, and we love to see that when we're talking about our points integrations, because that's easy for us to bring in into TeamSense, and it's a little bit of a spoiler what we'll get into next. The last thing that I wanted to talk about here on common challenges is just communication. The number one ask that we hear, or when we talk to our supervisors and HR managers, the number one ask that they get is, how many points do I have? Do I have enough points to call off tomorrow or whatever it is for this thing? And that is a big burden on the supervisors and on the HR team, who already have so many other things going on and don't have time to go sit down at the computer and look at how many points does Sarah have and where does that leave her. Yeah, we know that is not always the most urgent thing, and so that is something that we would love to help alleviate. We heard of one case actually where the attendance policy terminated at 10 points, but because the employee didn't have a great way of understanding how many points they had, they'd racked up something like 32 points in that time period, and their points just kept accruing because they didn't know, and the supervisors didn't have time to bring that into the system and give them the warnings at the appropriate thresholds. And so everyone was just, as you might imagine, pretty unhappy with that situation and not really excited about where that left them. But that's an example of where communication was just missed entirely, and there's no way to it was really difficult to get that back on track. So communication, very difficult around this topic, and it can be a sensitive topic, right? Any examples that you want to add there, Sarah?
No, I love the one you gave, and I think that covers it beautifully.
Awesome. All right. Uh, I would love to now kind of give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek of how this is going to manifest in TeamSense. Some of these things we already do, but some of them are kind of upcoming features. So things that we'll see in the coming few months in the TeamSense app. Okay, there we go. Sometimes the slides don't advance when you want to. Yeah, so over the last 6 months, we have been steadily improving transparency for employees. So we started 6 months ago with displaying an employee's occurrence history. So anytime they've called out or called in late, and then we added points integrations. So with a points integration, an employee is able to see their points and be able to use that information against their attendance policy to, if they understand it, to be able to decide for themselves if they have enough points to call off. So employees today see this screen before they report an absence, between when they text TeamSense to call off and when they get the absence survey. And so they are able to have the information they need to make a good decision. The next thing that we're working on is using an attendance policy in TeamSense to be able to show what the point value really means to the employee. So in addition to their attendance policy, they can see here that 3 points is out of a 10-point policy, and that means that they're close to maybe a first warning, but it's not a dire situation. They have a few more thresholds before any serious disciplinary action happens. To make that a little bit bigger, so what we'd like to do, what we're going to do to give employees all the information that they need to make good decisions about their attendance, we are showing them their the sort of threshold. And then when you expand that card, either by tapping the card or the little eye on it, you can see, an employee can see all of those different thresholds and what they mean, as well as a sort of quick explanation of the attendance policy. Like Sarah mentioned, many companies choose to make their full attendance policy available in Portal, but even if not, this is available to all employees and is written by your division and your team. So it goes right to the heart of what you want an employee to know before they call off. So what a tardy is going to mean, or what an unexcused absence is going to mean, and if they choose not to call off at all and they don't show up, what that means for them then. So we are trying to make it so that employees have all the information they need to make the best decisions about their attendance. And right now, we've heard from customers that without that data readily available, there's really a burden on both employees and supervisors to constantly be checking in and taking time and attention away from other concerns to address this. And we would like to help alleviate that pressure. To that same goal of making data readily available, today employees can text points to get their current balance at any time. With an attendance policy configured in TeamSense, the employees will be notified proactively before they hit a warning threshold. I also want to take a second to clarify that TeamSense is not looking to change or affect existing disciplinary processes in any way. This is just communication of the current policy. It is not saying like, hey, this is a verbal warning or this is a written warning and counting as a disciplinary action. It's really just giving an employee more information about where they currently stand. And again, encouraging better decisions, more transparency, more accountability. On the admin side, today we do display points on an employee's profile for both team leaders and admins, and show both those personas the occurrences that an employee has. You can see here that Ethan has a lot of occurrences for the last 12 months. And with the attendance policy configured, the admin app for TeamSense will also show what the employee sees. So it's that same threshold bar, as well as when the last notification was sent, whether that was manual or sent by his supervisor, and when the points data was last updated. So yeah, the points notifications that are sent to employees are also shown on the profile as in the occurrence history as well. So a bit of a better view for where the employee currently stands. And then this last little bit of bringing the attendance policy and points into the admin app for TeamSense is again another little sneak peek at what we're currently working on the product side. So on the attendance dashboard, we want to make it easier to see an employee's points as well. So there's a little bit of a data nuance here around the current call off that you're seeing and where the employee's points are. Where the employee's points are will be before this call off, because we don't know what this call, like whether this is going to be 1 point, whether it'll be excused or not. But this gives both the team leader and the admin a little bit of a better view of where the employee stands before this call off. And the colors and the icons here also correspond to what an employee sees, so everyone can be on the same page. That's it for kind of the sneak peek of product, but I did want to talk about these three things, the advantages of a points integration with TeamSense. So one, just transparency. So having, giving employees access to their information to make it easier both for employees, which is the number one reason that when we've spoken to customers, that's the number one reason that they gave for wanting to bring their attendance policy into TeamSense, just making it easier for employees to get the information, and also reducing manual effort for the current team that is always strapped and always has a million things going on. The second thing is transparency leads to accountability. So when everyone has the information they need, they make better decisions and they can call off when they need to, and choose to come in if if that's the right decision based on the number of points they have and what the team needs. And then the third is a little bit of a higher level benefit, which is productivity. When we have predictability, that allows for better planning and higher productivity and just a little bit more of a steady state overall. Anything else that you'd want to add here, Sarah? I feel like I've been talking a while.
No, you killed it. I love everything you just shared. I think that gave us a really great overview of not only how points look in TeamSense, but what here like you actually accomplish operationally when points are visible to employees. Um, the one thing I would add, Sharon, just from a on the ground perspective, is thinking about like ask yourself right now today, if I'm an employee calling off, does that employee have a way to check a points balance without asking you? And even better, do they have a way to do that without logging into an account in an external app? Because just in
Mm.
user rates, we see connection drop when they have to take that step. Um, both for the personal transparency and, like Sharon said, the good decision making, and also from the perspective of individual empowered decision making, that they don't have to kind of convey to an HR manager that they're considering taking the day off before they get that information so that they can truly make their own best choice and they don't have to disclose, for example, sensitive medical information to get started.
Yeah, that's a great addition. Um, yeah, I think that pretty much wraps us. The last thing that I will give a shameless plug to Sarah's team. If you are a current customer and interested in adding a points integration into your TeamSense, um, just let your customer success manager know. We'll get you started. Like we were saying earlier, spreadsheets extremely common. That is what we see most often and is a very easy way to start an integration. And we'd love to chat with you more about it.
Yeah, reach out to me whether you are a current TeamSense partner or this is something you're interested in learning more about and how you would even get started with TeamSense to do that. Please don't hesitate to reach out. As you can tell, we have a lot of passion about it. So very happy to even just consult with you on your current ideas.
Awesome. And I think Caroline, turn it over to you for the next one.
All right, I'm back, people. Okay, so as you can tell, Tuesdays are for TeamSense webinars. So you can catch us pretty much every week with the webinar. Next week's topic will be joined by Justin Sears and Adam Sinclair. They'll be talking about no call, no shows. Obviously, a hot topic going around for people, a major stress point for HR managers in particular. So we'll have some really great bullet points on that. And if you're registered to this webinar, you'll automatically get an email to join us for this next one. But let's go ahead and jump into Q&A. We do have a few questions coming in. We'll try our best to get to all of them, just at looking at the clock. First question that came through, this person's asking, we don't have a points-based attendance policy. We use banks of PTO days. Can we still use TeamSense in that case?
Absolutely. Actually, Sarah, go ahead. You will answer this way better than I will.
I'm sure you would say the exact same thing, but yes, 100%. Points integration is a really helpful option for folks who do use a point system. If you are not currently doing points assignment, TeamSense is still extremely helpful. It'll still allow you to capture all of that call off data and have accurate PTO banks. That's really common. Not every company is using a points policy. I think we're seeing it more and more frequently, but if that's not something you're doing yet, you are not alone. And our system is fully set up to adapt to any attendance policy or procedure that you're using internally. Our system is like our customer actually mentioned earlier with their points policy, our system is high ease, high impact. It's designed to really cleanly match with your own values and practices, giving you some really strong tools to streamline those things while still maintaining your own company identity. So please, yeah, get at us. We'd love to hear about new interesting things too. So if you're using PTO banks in interesting ways, we would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, I was only going to add on from the product perspective that that first slide that I showed of without a points integration, that is extremely common for us still. That is not it is a little bit of an evolution in terms of more deeper use of TeamSense, but most of our customers are still using the occurrence history and the banks of different reason codes or different balances to show employees where they are and what where they've accrued points in these, or sorry, where they've accrued occurrences at these different balances. So TeamSense can still give employees that transparency and promote that accountability if we don't have points configured in your TeamSense yet.
Mm, great point from a product perspective, Sharon.
Okay. And before we move on to the next question that was asked, I just always like to share this little call to action. If you want to talk to an expert, book a demo, you can also take a look at some of our existing customers' case studies. Really great information on our website. And like I mentioned too, you can easily register for next week's webinar just by checking your email. We'll send you an invite to that. Okay, moving on to next question. So this person is saying, kind of to what y'all talked a little bit about earlier around points and spreadsheets. This person saying our points are just stored in a spreadsheet. Can you set up an integration to a spreadsheet?
Love that question. Yeah, hopefully we answered that a little bit maybe after this question was asked, but spreadsheets are very common. Um, and just to give a little bit more detail on how this would work, whether you're holding points in a Google Sheet or an Excel, what we can do is set up an automatic sync to that spreadsheet so that when you add or change points totals, that data is automatically brought over into TeamSense. Um, in fact, I think we probably talked more about spreadsheets today, but I'll also mention that we do also have customers holding points totals in a time and attendance system. So if you are holding points totals in e-time, or I know that UKG does actually have a points module that some folks are using, we can also connect to those spaces via direct integration with an API or even by reporting based integration strategies.
Awesome. Okay, and then the final question, there's a question out there around can we access a recording to this? Absolutely. We'll have it up on that landing page that you used to join us, and we will send this out. But I think that's all the questions that we have for today.
Great
Okay.
one.
Well, Sarah, Sharon, thank you so much again for joining us for this webinar. As always, great talking with you both. Really appreciate just all the knowledge that you've shared. And like we said, if you would like to learn more, there's many ways to get in touch with us. We'd love to chat with you.
Right. Thank you for facilitating us, Caroline.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline.
Happy to do it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Talk to you soon.